The NHS is in crisis, possibly bigger than any we've seen before. Doctors have said that long delays in patients' access to urgent and emergency care could be causing up to 500 avoidable deaths each week. Ambulances in London have been told to hand over patients to A&E departments whether or not there are beds available for them. And the number of people waiting more than 12 hours to be admitted to A&E has increased by 355% since last November. But statistics can only get one so far. And on Good Morning Britain, Dr. Hilary Jones gave us an even more vivid insight into what's going on in our hospitals. He's describing posts in a WhatsApp group which includes 13,000 doctors.
There are thousands of these posts, and I've just picked 3 of them here as examples, and they are very worrying. In our hospital, we have such a long wait to get into the acute medical unit, the admissions unit, that we have a junior doctor on the roster called the car triage.
The car triage?
Car triage. This means they spend their whole shift checking on people waiting outside in their cars.
So hang on, so a doctor specifically assigned to go out to the car park?
Check on people in cars because there's no room in the corridors.
And that's the only thing that they do on their shift?
That's what they do on their shift.
They're in the car park?
Yeah, that's the first one. Second one, new terms that this doctor has learnt this week, reverse boarding. The term used to explain the process of kicking a patient out of a resus cubicle space in emergency care and placing them on a corridor so that a more critical patient can take their place. Today, we did this so a patient could die anywhere other than in the corridor.
Good God.
So they had a patient who was dying.
In the corridor.
Who was in the corridor. They had to remove a patient who was being cared for in a bed because they were in a better state.
Indeed.
So that they could put the dying patient into a bed.
Yeah.
What a decision to have to make.
Absolutely. And here's another one. This is not unusual. Twice this month, I have had patients miss the window for thrombosis and or thrombectomy, which refers to the use of clot-busting drugs to stop brain damage in someone who's had a stroke. We've missed the window, which is 2 hours, because they've been sat in an ambulance in our hospital car park for too long. That's 2 people with life-changing disabilities that could have been prevented. I am heartbroken. And people are saying for the first time in their careers, they're in tears at the end of their shift. And when they return to the next shift, the same patients are still waiting to be seen after 24 hours. These are just a small sample of what's going on. And for Rishi Sunak and the government to pretend that this is not a crisis when more than a dozen trusts have announced critical incidents is not only delusional, as the BMA say, I would say that at the very best, it's ill-informed misjudgment. At the very worst, it's total irresponsibility and incompetence.
There are just so many layers of tragedy to this story. I mean, people with life-changing disabilities because they're waiting in car parks, they've got to hospital, right? They've got to hospital. They've called the ambulance. The ambulance has come. It's probably taken a bit longer than they were expecting, but they're relieved when it arrives there. Then they get to hospital and they're waiting in the car park. And I mean, probably most people watching this, you probably waited a while in A&E at some point, you know, with a broken arm or something which has been painful. It's been an unpleasant experience. But if you're sitting there and waiting while you're getting a permanent life-changing disability because you cannot be seen in time, that is a level of state failure, which I think, 10 years ago, we just wouldn't really have been able to imagine. And now it's just the norm. One of the other many layers of tragedy there, sort of listening to that account, I just feel for these doctors and nurses and healthcare staff, ambulance drivers, who are having to go to work every day in the toughest conditions and then see people get life-changing disabilities or die. I mean, lots of people are dying because they're not getting treated quick enough because they can't treat them. It's mundane enough, but, in the studio, something's not quite working and you feel like, oh God, that show wasn't as good as it could have been because, I'd done something wrong in the script or we didn't have quite enough time or someone's off sick. It's a bit frustrating. But if you think, oh, I wasn't able to do my job properly today, and so 2 people died and someone got a life-changing illness in their car while they were waiting for me to see them. I can't imagine how traumatic that is. We're giving them real terms pay cuts. The least we can do is say, we are so sorry we put you in this dreadful position. We are going to change it as soon as possible. But obviously it's going to take a little bit of time. But in the meantime, anything you want, we're going to give it to you, right? We're putting you in this disgusting situation. The least we could do is give you a decent pay rise, let's say, to compensate you for this horrific experience we're putting you through on a day-to-day basis. Instead, we've said, no, go to work yourselves to death, watch people die because you don't have enough time to treat them. Oh, and by the way, you should also accept a real terms pay cut. And you wonder why the nurses are on strike, right? And the doctors are soon to be go on strike. And basically everyone in the public is like, good for you doctors, good for you nurses, because this is completely unacceptable what's going on. And it's very obvious Who the culprits are is the Conservative Party.